Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our July meeting of Jersey Collective Reads, where we are talking about Beach Badge Zine today. There are 3 issues, so collect them all. But yeah, so I'm Kerri Sullivan. I'm the founder of Jersey Collective. I'm the editor of the book New Jersey Fan Club. I'm a public librarian by day. And my fellow host, Courtney, is with us. You want to introduce yourself, Courtney?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Courtney Preiss. I am a novelist. My debut novel is coming out from Penguin Random House next April. It's called Welcome Home, Caroline Klein, and it takes place in Monmouth County. I live in Monmouth County. I grew up here, and I am really excited to chat all things Jersey and Beach Badge with you guys.
And yeah, so this evening with us, we have Patrick, who is the editor-in-chief and publisher of Beach Badge. So Patrick, do you want to go ahead and give us a brief introduction and then also shout out the contributors that are with us this evening?
Sure. Well, first off, Courtney, Kerri, thank you for having us on here. Beach Badge is a submission-based zine that I started last year. As Kerri pointed out, 3 issues deep now. And they're all nonfiction submissions that people send in, and then a few odds and ends of my own. And peppered in there are some, reviews of books in the occasional restaurant and whatnot, random factoids about the area. And I don't know, it's sort of like my backhanded love letter to the Jersey Shore.
I love that description of backhanded love letter. I'm frankly sick of just hearing this is my love letter to wherever. Backhanded love letter though, we need.
It's like a family sort of thing. Like you can't, you might not be able to stand them either, but you won't let anybody else talk shit about them.
100%. Completely agree. Did you want to I know that Kerri and I have a bunch of questions, but do you want to shout out the contributors before we jump in?
Absolutely. So on the top right of my screen, there is my lovely wife, Davita Breyer. She's a contributor. We have Mr. Ed Kemp. There he is, up in Jersey City. We have Mr. Nemitz, who just fritzed on us. We have Laura, who is indirectly a contributor because she sends me things to read and review, and then just like random ephemera, which is always cool. Ken Bossert, who is a contributor to the first couple issues and who is a zine stalwart. He's been publishing his Ken Chronicles forever and a day, which is a really great per zine. We have Dan Taylor at the bottom, who is a contributor. He has a great piece in the current issue about the filming of a Golden Age slasher movie in Cape May in 1980. Tom Minton is a contributor to the most current issue, and anybody who's on Instagram might be familiar with Sandy Hook History, which is his handle. And he's obviously all about area history, and he has an excellent piece in the current issue about the Battle of the Atlantic and U-boats off the coast of Jersey. And then I don't know if Carolina Morales did she rejoin? Is that her? They are who they are.
Perfect, thank you. Yeah, you talked about it briefly at the beginning, just kind of what Beach Badge is, but could you tell us a little bit about like why I know a lot about it because I've read them and I've talked to you about this before, but I'm gonna act like I don't know, so I'm gonna ask you some basic questions for everyone else. But so kind of how did this get started? Why did you want to do this? What else have you worked on that kind of got you here?
So even though I have lived in Maryland for roughly the last 20 years, I grew up at the shore, and I was there well into my 20s. And it's just remained an indelible part of who I am. And it's one of those things that, I guess also sort of like family that you kind of, in some cases you drift away from a bit and then you sort of come back, even though I always stayed in touch and always visited and whatnot. For quite a number of years, about 15 years after I got to Baltimore, I started doing a similar sort of publication, though in hindsight, I think it was a little less refined, called Smile Hun, You're in Baltimore, that was all submission-based pieces on Baltimore. And it was a backhanded love letter to Baltimore. So, you know, it was a little bit of everything. It was always, you know, I mean, there was a lot of tongue-in-cheek humor, a lot of harrowing moments, but, you know, generally speaking, it was also sort of a bit of a civic booster. I incredibly actually had people tell me they moved here because of it. But anyway, even all those years that I had been doing Smile On, even in the midst of that, I always thought about applying a similar formula to the Jersey Shore where I was actually from. And it took me a while to come around to it. It was one of those things, I'll do that. I'll do that. Yeah, maybe I'll do that next year or what. And then I guess it was actually the year, it was 21, I think, 2021. And, you know, after a year of basically not being able to go anywhere or do anything, we found ourselves able to, you know, at least get out a bit. And the Jersey Shore, you know, is 2.5, 3 hours away. So it was accessible. And summer of 21, we made a lot of trips up to the shore. And it just kind of, you know, I kept taking pictures and it was cool, like revisiting places and finding new things. And it just sort of started to gel in my head. And then I got to a point where I was like, well, you know, this might be the time finally. And so I started out with a handful of people that I knew and or were related to. And I started reaching out to them with the idea and saying, hey, if you'd like to submit something to this. And I felt like there was, if the Baltimore thing had the kind of audience that it had, like I felt like an area as vast as the Jersey Shore would have an audience. It just might take a little time to find it. And lo and behold, you know, people got back to me. I think we had about 10 or 12 contributors in the first issue, and it was really, I felt pretty solid. There were some really solid pieces, and people generally really liked it. And you know, and each issue, I mean, kind of my mantra was always with Smile Hunter in Baltimore, and likewise with Beach Badge, that I hope I try in some way to make every issue just a little bit better than the last one. So
I wanted to know, so I've been calling Beach Badge a zine. Like, I think this is the first issue. When I originally picked this up, I was like, yes, a new zine. Is that a misnomer? Are you calling it a zine? Should we be calling it something else? And then I have subsequent questions if it is indeed a zine.
kind of like Smile Hunt. It's sort of this like literary redheaded stepchild that nobody wants to claim because it's too, I have found, generally speaking, it's a little too DIY and like punk for the lit crowd. And conversely, it's like maybe just a little too clean and organized for like the gutter punks. So I guess it depends on who you ask. You know, by some standards, I guess it would, I think of it as a zine. But you know, I guess it really sort of is an eye of the beholder kind of thing.
Okay, I feel that. Yeah. I had been calling it a zine and I was like, maybe it's also like a lit mag though. It's kind of both. So it's good to know that I'm not like,
I'm a big fan of mixing things up. I don't like dichotomies, or I'm like, you know what? I want to keep people guessing. I want to like confuse people. I want people to question themselves and their own, you know, conclusions.
I am with you. I think we had a vote from Ed for zine. I'm with you. Let's call it a zine. I'm curious to know if there are other zines that sort of served as inspiration, favorite ones that you have, I guess either like zine or lit mag or something that's kind of uncategorizable. Um, you know,
It,
for you, Patrick.
it was actually Davita who got me into the whole zine scene, as it were. And I did a couple of really early, like one-off sort of things, that were, okay, but I was really just kind of getting my feet wet and all. And there are some zines out there, even some place-based zines that are really good that have been publishing, forever. And Dan Taylor actually does one of my favorite ones, the Hungover Gourmet, which is like basically everything that sounds like. And that's always been one of my favorite zines. Davita actually publishes a long-running review zine called Xerography Debt, which the new issue 54, I think, just came out. And that reviews small press and zine stuff with every issue, and that's a trove of that sort of thing. There are other place-based zines that I have read, but I don't think I've really read, and if there are, it's only because I haven't encountered them. There aren't any that I think quite inhabit the space that Beach Badge does. It's sort of its own, again, it's like a redheaded stepchild, and a little bit of that is a lot of that is by design. But also some of it is just kind of waiting to see, where the current takes you.
That's great. So what kind of, it's all nonfiction, right? It's all nonfiction. Okay. So what kind of stories are you interested in publishing, and like how do you go about getting submissions, and what's that process like?
I like all sorts of stuff, and again, it's like I kind of liken it to what it must be like going fishing, where you just kind of throw your hook in and wait to see what nibbles. I even 3 issues in, I have gotten a pretty great array of stories, I think. I mean, there have been like some just hilarious, antic driven pieces. There have been other, a friend of mine from college wrote a piece about growing up in Ducktown in Atlantic City in the 90s, which was pretty harrowing. And it's all over the place. I mean, I don't know if Rain Alexander is on here tonight, but she wrote a really good piece in the first issue about going to Manasquan in the late 80s with a girlfriend, just sort of as she was kind of beginning to transition. And it was just a very like compelling, like coming of age piece. It was fantastic. And it was not like Rain was actually she's Baltimore based, and she was always one of my favorite Smile Hunt contributors. And so I was very pleasantly surprised when out of the blue she was like, "Oh, I've got a Jersey short story for you." It's like, "Oh, awesome." And then I read it, and like a lot of people were just like, this is just a great like coming of age piece, and it was pretty cool. So at the same time, sometimes I reach out, I target people, so to speak. Like for instance, last winter while I was working on issue 3, I discovered Molly Golubkow's book, The Hotel on St. James Place, which is about her memoir of growing up in the late 60s, early 70s, and her parents owned a hotel across from the Irish pub in AC. And it's just this really fun book of just inhabited by all the characters that you would expect there to be. Yeah, that's it right there. And I reached out to her because it was actually a relatively recent book, I think 21 or 22. And I found her online and said, hey, would you be interested in? So she actually submitted to me an excerpt, which is in number 3. And it's very like, it's riotous, but at the same time, I mean, her parents are Holocaust survivors, so there's how all of that informed them, which in turn informed her. And it's a very compelling read, I think. So yeah, it's really like the shore in general. I mean, I could sit and write all my experiences, and that would be like amusing for 5 minutes. But the shore is so much richer and more robust than that. And everybody, my view is that like everybody holds a piece of that greater truth. So like whatever somebody is writing is true, or at least as far as their experience is concerned, it's true. But that kind of like is, each one is a thread in that like broadcloth of, the Jersey Shore, good, bad, and ugly.
I'm curious to hear maybe from some of our contributors, how did you decide what you wanted to create for or submit to Beach Badge? What maybe like what that creative process was like a bit, if anyone on here is willing to share.
Yeah, whoever, I saw Ken, Brian, Dan raised their hands.
Yeah, I didn't see a place on the bottom to raise hands, so otherwise I would have done that. You want me to say anything?
Yeah, go ahead, Ken.
Well, first of all, I think anybody that has a particular love for an area, or maybe it's a particular band or anything like that, anytime you find somebody else that appreciates the same things that you do, it's always great that you get together and you talk about it, you share your ideas, you share your experiences. So when I first saw that Patrick was doing this on the Jersey Shore, the first thing that popped into my head was all the experiences I've had there. So, being that I love to write anyway, I was like, yeah, I got a couple of things I put in there. And I think what it is that I've got ideas and Dan's got ideas, and, everybody's got ideas that they think about when they were there and the things that they remember. So, this is an outlet for everybody to, put their stories out there and share it, because I could only tell my story about the Jersey Shore to so many people so many times. This way here, I get to share it with a whole bunch of people, So,
Random strangers.
Yeah. So that's basically, I think, what it's all about.
Nemitz, speak now.
So don't unmute yourself.
Not happening.
I'll be damned. Look at that. I muted myself.
Look at that.
Why and how I contribute, I think, is really a two-part answer, to be honest with you. First of all, thanks for having us. This is awesome. For whatever reason, I write a lot of technical stuff, and I get to travel the country speaking, and it's kind of boring. I have a lot of stories, and I like to get them out, and this is, fun writing. I'm not worried about what laws or whatnot. We're worried about, well, in retrospect, I should be worried about what laws I'm writing about in this
Anybody
stuff.
who's read any of your stories will know that's obviously the case.
Yeah, that's a fair point. I'm incriminating myself here. But so I get to talk all over the place and write documents. I've been published a bunch of times, but it's not fun. I've lived at the Jersey Shore my entire life. Courtney, just like you, I live in Monmouth County most of my entire life. The only time I didn't live in Monmouth County is when I was at college. So
in Atlantic County.
In Atlantic County with Pat. So all the stories of my nonsense are Beach Badge related. It makes it easier. And one of the challenges I have is when I write stories is, you never really know who your audience is. So in this case, my audience is generally Pat, to be honest with you. And I like to come up with stories that Pat's never heard before, of stupid things I've done without him. And I think I did that the last time pretty well.
Yeah, the train story in number 3. I hadn't heard that one before.
So, I mean, that's how I come about it. I just have stories. And I like to get them out there. And, if someone loves them, great. Hopefully they do. If they don't love them, maybe the next time.
Anybody who takes the train ever out of Point Pleasant will appreciate his story from Beach Badge number 3.
It really was one of the dumbest things I've ever done, but it's a great story.
It was epically stupid, and it was a great story. Mr. Taylor.
Let me unmute myself. Am I on?
You're on.
All right. So
there,
I have dual loves. I love food and I love movies. And so I kept trying to figure out, how am I going to bring these two things together in Beach Badge? And I happened to figure out that the 1980s slasher The Prowler was filmed in Cape May, New Jersey. So that became my kind of hook to bring things together for my piece in Beach Badge #3. And then I realized, well, wait a second, this is kind of my hook going forward. So I'm working on a piece for Beach Badge #4 about Atlantic City and the Brian De Palma film Snake Eyes, featuring Nicolas Cage. So I kind of, I mean, I love the Jersey Shore. I grew up going to Ocean City, New Jersey. My wife is from LBI. So I have a lot of love for the Jersey Shore, but to be able to bring those two things together, food, Jersey Shore, and movies, and bring all those things together, that's like that's sort of my wheelhouse. So that's what I'm looking to do going forward. So if anybody has any suggestions about other movies that were filmed at the Jersey Shore and towns I can visit and eat and drink at, I'm there. Like, hit me up, hungovergourmet.com.
And
So
you have a new issue coming out pretty
yes,
soon.
yes. And in fact, Davida and Pat both have pieces coming up.
That's right, I do.
Yeah, yeah. New
What
issue
about
of the Hungover Gourmet, which is coming back thanks to my association with Beach Badge and conversations with Pat, and the encouragement to bring back a zine that I thought had died 15 years ago. So, yeah.
How about Tom? I know Tom said he had to leave a little early.
Hello, folks. Good evening. Pat, I'm sorry I'm having trouble with my camera. You guys are just going to have to listen to my big mouth. I apologize.
I can picture you in my mind's eye.
Well, thank you. I joined into this wonderful project. Great minds think alike. I messaged Pat at about the time he was getting ready to message me, asking if I would like to contribute. And we sort of just found each other in the middle. As I mentioned in my bio, in the 3rd issue of Beach Badge, my family has been in Monmouth County, New Jersey since the American Revolutionary War. We're fairly certain that ancestor was a privateer before he became a coast watcher, so I have pirate blood in me.
Yeah.
I've had family involved in local politics. I've had family involved in pretty much up and down the history of the Jersey Shore. We had a family member who was a sea captain who was shipwrecked off a Long Branch, and he washed ashore. So I'm as connected to it as anybody else. As to my piece about the U-boats, there is so much about Monmouth County and the Jersey Shore that everybody knows, and then there's so much more that no one has ever heard of. And the reason that I let off with the piece about stepping in tar balls as a kid is that's relatable to pretty much everybody's parents and grandparents anymore. That anytime I ask that question, people are always like, "Yeah, I do remember tar balls." Now that you mention it, well, that was a byproduct of the Battle of the Atlantic, and no one realizes that for 2 world wars, not just World War II, but also World War I, New Jersey was a war zone. And also, New Jersey had great contributions to the arsenal of democracy with our industrial capacity. Fort Hancock was the cornerstone of the defenses in New York Harbor. Fort Monmouth was the driving force behind America's technology and radar development. I'll be writing a piece about that down the road. For those of you who are getting ready to see Oppenheimer, Camp Evans, which is the satellite post of Fort Monmouth that is now a National Historic Landmark down in Belmar, they helped design part of the arming mechanism for the bomb. So there's all this history lurking in the background of our wonderful Jersey Shore and Monmouth County. And the one thing that I sadly got to experience when I was a park ranger at Sandy Hook is no one knows about it. So this is just my opportunity to give back to a state that has been home to my family for almost 250 years, and to keep those stories alive.
One of the things I think that it's kind of cool, like hearing from different folks here and all that, is just like all the disparate directions and angles people are coming from, and that's kind of the Jersey Shore. I mean, one of the things that I really, like about it is diversity of it in all respects. I mean, there is just like pretty much if it's not at the Jersey Shore, it's either nailed to the ground somewhere else or it just doesn't exist.
I think that can be our new campaign. I feel like there hasn't been a good one. I don't know that this is a good one, but that like New Jersey and you perfect together. I think we can come up with a new iteration about that nailed down piece.
We had a lot of fun for a number of years coming up with new slogans for Baltimore, because every so many years they would come up with something that you're like, wow, they paid somebody $50,000 to come up with that. Unbelievable. And you could still see like the weather-worn benches that advertise the greatest city in America. Mr. Kemp, you've been awfully quiet.
Oh yeah, I'm just sitting here listening. Yes, thank you for having me, for having us. Yeah, being part of Beach Badge was rad because it combines like two things that I love, which are zines, and I loved Smile Hunt. Like, so when I saw that you know, Pat was putting that together, a Jersey one, I was like, ooh, I definitely want to be a part of that, right? So yeah, like I love zines and I love New Jersey. Anyone who's ever come across me, I definitely mentioned multiple times how great New Jersey is, right? So yeah, to be able to write about a place like as beautiful and magical as the Jersey Shore, yeah, I was ready to jump at it. I had to think of a story because I went there when I was a kid and stuff like that. Yeah, that's where everybody went after prom, right? You always go down to Seaside Heights, right? Like, so yeah, like I remember things about it, but I really had to search, and it kind of came to me one day as I was driving down the shore early one morning from Jersey City that, oh my God, I'm a Benny, right? Like I'm the person that everybody down at the shore hates, right? And then I remembered that I had that realization a few years prior, and I was like, oh, that's what I'm going to write about. So yeah, the refineries on the turnpike sparked that memory and allowed me to contribute. And yeah, I'm really happy that I got to be part of not just the first issue, but the second issue too. And yeah, super happy about it. So thanks for. And if you want to pick up Beach Badge, I'm going to be at Lambertville Zine Fest on Saturday. So if this has inspired you to check out more zines, you should come to Lambertville Zine and Comic Fest. Yeah, I could send you all some information if you want. So yes,
That would be great if you could send that through. I'm always like, we'll put it in the show notes as though we are a podcast, which we are not.
But
But
I'll put it in the YouTube description. So
yes,
Yeah.
those are the show notes.
Acme Screen and Room in Lambertville, 11 to 5. I'll put in the notes or whatever it's called, the chat. That's what it's called.
cool. Perfect. Thank you.
Laura, you must.
And by the way, Kerri, your book is awesome. I just got done with
thank
it
you.
like a week ago. And Hungover Gourmet is an awesome scene as well. So yes, awesome to be sharing the screen with y'all.
I would just like to momentarily second that with what Ed said, that New Jersey Fan Club is fantastic. I mean, just the array of voices that you got in that. And if I had, as I reviewed it in, I think the second issue of Beach Badge, and I think I said something to the effect that if I had but one complaint, it's just that there weren't more shore pieces. But even at that,
I really appreciated that. Yeah.
even at that, there were a lot of shore pieces, and you know, they were all fantastic. That zine thing going on in Lambertville, Laura must know something about that.
Yeah, I'm hoping to get there. I'm not quite sure if I will, but I'm planning to be there. We really don't have too many things like that in New Jersey. I think there was just one up in, was there one up in Jersey City, Ed?
Back at the beginning of the year, there was the like the art book fair. That's actually where I bought the fan club book.
Yeah, I was there. It was a great event.
Yes.
Mana Contemporary Dense Magazine put it on.
Yes.
So
And
it's
is that Laura from the Zine Library?
That's
Down in
me,
Trenton?
yes.
Oh, hey.
Trent makes zines
Oh,
Yes.
okay. I didn't recognize the name either.
in
Okay.
my natural environment here. The zines are out there, but I'm in here.
I would just like to shout out to Laura for what she does and also for being an early supporter of Beach Badge.
Well, I love Jersey. I'm a Jersey girl. I grew up on the east side of Jersey, and now I'm working on the west side. So it's really cool to see some Jersey zines or Jerseynes, hashtag Jerseynes. We're trying to get that as a thing going because we're clever. And I think that we need more. We need more representation in Jersey, because we're not New York, we're not Philly, we're us, and we need to get the word out there that we're not a barrel tapped at both ends. We are just the barrel, So I'm kind of happy. For people who don't know, I'm at the Trenton Free Public Library, and I used to do zines back in the 80s. And one of our new librarians came to me and said she wanted to start a zine library. And I said, oh, I got some old ones. If you want to start, as seed, here's some seed zines for you. And then she left, and I became the default zine librarian. So it's been kind of fun. I'm the archivist in the local history department. So I also created a little zine series of Trenton history, little mini zines, which are fun. So that way I can keep doing the zines and it can still be part of my job description because I have to do history stuff. So it's been fun. I'm learning a lot about how zines have evolved since I was doing them long, long time ago. Very different.
I love your little zines, by the way.
Oh, good. Thanks. Little bite-sized pieces of Trenton history.
But they're very well done, very neat. Nice.
How about Davida? What have you got to say about all this?
As far as my contribution, or just one thing I was thinking about is listening is I like that the zine runs the gamut from U-boat history to Holocaust survivors and businesses to momentary glimpses in time, be they past or present. And I think, like Brian, the piece I wrote for issue number 3, it wrote itself. It was just one of those incidents that was so horrific you kind of had to write it down. And I think I just walked into we came home and I just walked in and sat down and wrote it. So before I forgot what happened. But like Brian, these are just moments, and you go to Atlantic City, you expect Atlantic City to be Atlantic City, and then it's more than Atlantic City.
One of the things I always tell people is about the Jersey Shore is it will always, without fail, send you home with a story. It might not be a story you like, but you'll have a story. And in some cases, it might be a story that grows on you over time.
I love that.
We've had so many good catchphrases.
I know.
I can't wait to go back and watch the YouTube video and write these down.
Did every contributor who wanted to say something get a chance to?
I don't know if she wants to speak, but Lisa Carlson was a contributor.
Oh. Should be able to unmute now, Lisa, if you wanted to. No pressure.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Hi. Yeah, you were just asking the question about, I guess, how did you decide to write, or something like that, like where'd you get the inspiration? I think somebody just said that like the stories write themselves. My story was about kind of a surreal experience in the Saint, and I had been thinking about the Saint lately because it's sort of this mystery about what's going on with it. And it's there. Was it purchased by somebody else? Is it going to reopen? This whole sort of thing. So I had seen on Instagram, I think, a call for submission. And I decided to write a story that really explained a poem I had written when I had an incident at the Saint. And that's how I came up with my contribution.
Nice. I don't know. I can only see whatever names are on the screen right now, so I'm not sure if there's anybody else on that's a contributor or not. I know Laura Jackson had said she might be in, as well as Mariette. I don't know if she's on.
I don't think so. But I wanted to ask you, just switching gears a little bit, one thing I like about the way you put the zine together. So you have, we talked a lot about all the personal stories and everything that people are writing, but then also sprinkled in, you do like book reviews and restaurant reviews. And I don't know what my question is, but I like that you combine, you know, different formats too, and not just straightforward essays.
I always liked growing up at the shore. I always liked, you know, I mean, I was an In Search Of kid. So like, I always liked anything that's TV Guide branded as speculation. And especially when you had like those weird sound effects and everything. And I was a really big fan as a kid of the books that Charles Adams and David Siebold did about it was like Legends of Long Beach Island and stuff. And they were just always a lot of fun. And you know, there were people's stories, but then I also like, you know, I liked some of the more scholarly stuff too, like Cunningham's New Jersey Shore book from the 50s, which is one that I'm going to get around to eventually reviewing as well. But you know, that is, you know, a seminal work. But you know, it's just that the history is just, you know, and even, you know, into the present. I mean, it's just fascinating. And I mean, it's interesting to go back, you know, to be at the boardwalk or like the Route 9 corridor, and just see how much has changed and how much is exactly the same as it ever was.
Shout out to Route 9. That's my
Yeah.
corridor.
Route 9 corridor. That whole I don't know, arguably like Bayville to Port Republic stretch maybe just has not really changed a whole heck of a lot. Carol's Caravel Inn is no longer in Manahawkin, but for the most part, you know, there's maybe a Walmart or two, but you know, otherwise it's kind of in, you know, sort of this temporal limbo.
Do you make it back up here a lot? And does that kind of help with putting the zine together, just being around New Jersey again?
I get back a fair amount of time, you know, probably not as often as I would like, but I think about as often as is practically feasible. So, you know, I would say maybe on average, like once every couple of months or so, every 2 to 3 months, I get back up. And what's also interesting too is like I'll go. There'll be different permutations. So like occasionally it's just me, but usually I'm either going with my family or, you know, one of our best friends from college will come back up. He lives down in North Carolina now. And, you know, maybe once a year he'll come back up and we'll take a ride up there for a weekend. And he's from Metuchen originally. And, but he grew up, you know, largely, you know, his family summering in you know, in LBI, and then we have all kinds of like crazy college stories that involve the shore that things are, they're just like, wow, boy, that was stupid. I can't believe I survived that. You know what I'm talking about, Nemitz.
I can neither confirm nor deny any of those stories, Your Honor.
Good answer. Good answer.
Do you have any advice for people who want to write about where they're from? I don't know. What advice would you give somebody that wants to do that kind of exploration that you publish in Beach Badge?
Well, if you have any kind of, you know, connection to the Jersey Shore, good, bad, or indifferent, I mean, obviously, like, consider Beach Badge. That being said, I guess it depends on where you're from. You know, I don't know. I mean, there are some places that I wouldn't think are necessarily that interesting, but I'm not from there, so also who am I to say? You know, and you know, Jersey, I mean, that's kind of the thing, you know, like to speak a little bit to Ed's point about being a Benny. I mean, you know, that's one thing I never got about the locals, like knocking the bennies. Like, yeah, I hate traffic, I hate like all that, but like these people put food on your table when you base your entire economy around them coming in for like 3 months out of the year. Yeah, what do you expect? You know, you're gonna have to, you know, it's a trade-off. But I I just love getting the different perspectives, and you know, whether it's somebody whose, you know, family has been there like Tom's for, you know, 300 years, or somebody who just moved there, or somebody who was like, oh yeah, Jersey, I went there once, never going again. Like it's all, you know, part of the experience. And you know, I think all of those voices are valid in their own way. I might not agree with them, but or maybe I do. I don't know.
I mean, I'd just add too, there's such a long history of place as character. James Lee Burke infuses everything he writes with Louisiana or in Montana. I read Deer Season, and you wouldn't think that Nebraska would be that interesting, but it was such a good place infused novel. And I think that because it informs character, it can become character if you're really writing about place.
I never had any interest whatsoever in seeing Texas in any part until I really got into reading Joe R. Lansdale. And he really, like, East Texas is like as much a character in everything he writes as the characters. And I'm a big fan of place as character myself. And you know, I will add that, like, DeVita last year published her debut novel called Sinkhole, which is set in Central Florida in the mid 80s. And she grew up in South Florida. I didn't grow up in Florida, obviously, but it's very immersive. I mean, you totally get a feel for certainly what you would imagine it would have been like to live in Central Florida in the mid 1980s. Again, good, bad, and ugly. And I think she did an outstanding job in that, capturing place.
It was also a backhanded love letter.
Again, love a backhanded love letter, but Davida, I'm writing that down because I have to read that. I have such I don't even know. I just like have such a fondness for novels or other pieces of writing that I don't know, like I guess backhanded love letter is really like the perfect distillation of it. But they talk about states that are traditionally culturally maligned in some way, the way that Florida certainly is, the way that New Jersey certainly has been to a certain extent. Like, I've never lived in Florida. I love Florida novels. Like, I will absolutely pick up a book if it takes place in Florida because you know that, or you hope that, you know, the state is going to become its own character in that way. And yeah, I feel similarly compelled, obviously, by Jersey work as well. I'm curious, and certainly, Patrick, you can answer this, Davida. I think that there's a bunch of people on this call who could speak to this a bit, but for any listeners or audience members who are interested in building up a publication of their own, maybe starting their own zine, do you have any advice, any like good places to start, anything to avoid? Would love to hear from you on that.
Well, for the physical act of creating a zine, Davida, there's actually that zine that you created about making a zine.
Yeah, I mean, I have it's called MetaZine, and I created it for an event at the Salt Lake City Public Library some years ago. But it's a look at how to, you know, what zines are, how to make them. And the best thing about zines, it's kind of like punk. They're anything you choose it to be. It can be a single sheet of paper. It can be a polished, well-designed 64-page, professionally edited collection. It can be anything.
I think one of my earliest conversations with Dan, like 20 odd years ago or whatever, where I think you were saying something about somebody taking like serious grievance with some review you wrote about something, movie or whatever it was, and you were basically to the effect of like, all right, if you don't like it, go out and do your own.
It was D. Snyder's Strangeland.
Oh, is that what it was?
Yeah, I have gotten more hate mail about that review for whatever reason. Like, D. Snyder must have like this very, very hardcore audience of fans who love his terrible horror movie that he made called Strangeland. And I would reply to all these people and be like, okay, great. Like, go start your own zine. Like, I started my original zine, Exploitation Retrospect, because somebody gave a horrible review to Reanimator, which is my favorite movie of all time. So like, that's why I started a zine in 1986, like an idiot.
So you've hate published for 30 years.
Yes, basically. Yes. And feel really good about it. But my only piece of advice would be get a PO box. Like, yes, because when I started Exploitation Retrospect, the local newspaper did a story on us, and they published my home address, and my mother was livid. And so I went and got a PO box the next day. So go get a PO box if you're going to start a zine.
Hey, Dan, can you give me that PO box? I'm a huge D. Snyder fan. I want to tell you something.
And that
typical Nemitz.
I do have a PDF available of the MetaZine, and I can also send it. It's free to any library who wants a copy. So Laura, if you don't have a copy, I think I sent you one, but they're free to libraries, and I have a PDF if anybody just wants one via PDF. Just I can give you my email if anybody asks.
And yeah, I would just speak to like topically, I write about, or whether it's writing or drawing or, whatever, what you like or what you hate, case may be.
If I could just add something to that. I've had a lot of people that got my zine, and later on, years later, I read their zine, and more than one time I've had somebody say, I use your zine as not a template, but I use your zine as inspiration. And they didn't do anything exactly like mine, but they must have read my zine and maybe another dozen zines, and they took what they liked about each one, and that's how they wound up doing their own thing. So Jamie Nix down in Australia, she told me that a long time ago. She does something, Sea Green Zines. And she wrote me a letter one time. She told me how much she enjoyed my zine, and she based her zine all on mine. I was like, well, okay, thank you. It's like a compliment you never expect to get like that, where somebody tries to not emulate you, but, kind of use you for inspiration.
I had somebody in New Zealand credit Smile Hun for launching a publication that they started.
And I will just say, Ken does one of the best perzines out there, because it's a little bit of everything. It's a true slice of life. And you can take everything from a hot tub repair, to a travel log, and people feel like they're there with you.
And you
learn something.
Wait till you see the new one. It's all printed up. It's a 4-page spread on the hot tub. but I'll let you be surprised.
I think I'd like to riff off of that and say that I've always, even going back to the Smile Hun days, I've always tried to go with a sort of almost like Barstool kind of storytelling, brand of storytelling, very colloquial and edited, but I try to keep people's voices as intact as possible, because I don't want it to be I don't want it to be like sanitized to the point where it's, AI generated, the parlance of our day. And I because it's the stories are great, but it's the people and the characters behind the stories, I think, that are, drive it as much as anything too. Jersey, the Jersey Shore is, it's obviously it's a place, and it's a physical thing. There are, physical landmarks and this and that, but I mean, it's as much about the people there, or the people who visit there, as anything else. And I think you really need to really get the nature of a place or the feel for a place. I think you really need to dig into that. And if you're looking for, I think too, inclusivity is key. I mean, you need to have, like, as many voices as you can muster, and, anybody that, and, that's one of the things even with Smile Hun, was that, I started Smile Hun back before social media and everything. And so there really wasn't any of that, never mind Zoom. And so literally it was still very much, if you wanted to be published anywhere, there was either zines or, then there were, newspapers and magazines and things like that, which are not, which traditionally weren't necessarily accessible to everybody. And sometimes, I was always kind of compelled by the fact that there were all these great stories floating out there that just would disappear into the stratosphere, simply because there was no vehicle or avenue or platform for recording them. And with Smile Hun and now with Beach Badge, that was something that I kind of hoped to be able to provide, was giving a platform to some of these voices and stories and things that might not otherwise find a home. And and hence it's a redheaded stepchild.
I love that. That's great. Courtney, did you have any last thoughts, or getting close to
I know, I was gonna say we're like just about at time. I guess I just wanted to close with, I feel like we usually do like a little bit of like a lightning round situation, but just to close out, any recommendations for different New Jersey media, whether it's books, TV, movies, etc. If people like the vibe of Beach Badge, anything that they should check out on their way out?
Well, again, obviously, New Jersey Fan Club, and I'm not just saying that because the editor's right there on the screen, but that, is, if you really want to get, a more holistic sense, sort of like Beach Badge, but in a more holistic sense of the state entirely. It's a great, it's absolutely fantastic for that. And again, I would like to recommend the Hotel on St. James Place. I think that was just a very compelling story with very, her just very unique circumstances. And plus she starts it off with a very amusing anecdote involving the actor Burt Lancaster in like 1979 when he's in AC shooting Atlantic City. But that one, the Cunningham book is, even though it's dated now, I mean, it's like 1950 something. It's actually pretty accessible. I really like the history, and also, even though a lot of people probably saw the series, Boardwalk Empire, the book that the series was based on, which is actually nonfiction. It's not, the book is nonfiction. The series is sort of a fictionalized version of the truth. But the book was written by a former Superior Court judge from Jersey. It's just, and the amazing thing is that entire series, like 5 seasons of it, is like 2 chapters in the book. And the rest of it is like the history of Atlantic City. And it actually really kind of opened my eyes a bit to like, just, really the how AC's character developed over time. And I think it's kind of been interesting to me because, like, you know, I grew up, even though I grew up and down the coast, it was largely in smaller shore towns. And the funny part is that now when I go back up there, maybe it's like 20 odd years of living in Baltimore, but I actually find myself gravitating more now to like AC and Asbury Park than any of the other places. I still like to visit them periodically, but usually if I'm just planning an escape or something like that, those are the places I like to go. 20, 30 years ago, I never would have thought that like Asbury Park would be like the place I'd be going. But
I think it's a big shock. And I live in Asbury Park, and I grew up in Monmouth County, and then I left for many years, went to college in Boston, lived in New York for a long time, and just moved back here a couple of years ago, like right before the pandemic happened. And moved to Asbury Park with my then boyfriend, now husband. And I was like, I can't believe we live here. Like, I used to come down here when I was a teenager and horrify my parents.
Yeah.
And I know that it, you know, was sort of like that for decades. So I think it's a big shock to us all that
I
we're hanging
prefer
out
old
in
Asbury,
Asbury.
to be honest with you. Give me the Asbury 20 years ago was better.
The
Oh,
Oh
fact.
yeah.
If you don't mind, I have one little story I just wanted to throw in there. I have a bunch of friends in Sweden. I used to sell comic books to people all over the place. Some of my best customers were in Sweden. So it turned out that a bunch of these guys wanted to come over and visit me one time. We're talking about 20, 30 years ago. They came over, they stayed with me, and they said, we want to rent a car. And I said, why do you want to rent a car? I'll take you wherever you want to go. No, we want to drive over to Asbury Park. We wanted to see where Bruce Springsteen, you know, we want to see the Stone Pony. We wanted to do all that stuff. And these guys went, they rented a car just so they could ride over to Jersey to Asbury Park. And that was the big thing for them, you know? So,
for a long time, I don't know if it's still as much the case or not, but for a long time, there were a lot of people who came to Baltimore because they wanted to see The Wire.
Oh wow.
And yeah, I don't know. But you know, I don't know. I would strongly encourage anybody, you know, invite anyone out there who has any kind of stories that they want to share, you know. And I would emphasize too is that, you know, some of us are, you know, writers in the sense that, you know, maybe we do it as part of our day jobs or whatever, but not everyone is a writer per se that, you know, appears in, you know, what's more important, I think, is a good story, and a good story told well. And, you know, you don't need to be a writer, as it were, for that.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that about what you're doing. I think it's so accessible, and it's not intimidating for people to, like, your submission guidelines are really open and encouraging, and I think that's really lovely. But yeah, it's been about an hour, so we'll cut you loose. But it was so nice to talk to all of you and to see you all again or meet you for the first time here. Thank you so much for spending the time with us.
Courtney, Kerri,
so
thank you.
much.